Let's talk about feet. This is great. So I got a question that someone asked me, and the question is revolving a couple of different instances in the Bible, in the Old Testament, regarding feet. And I'm going to add one to the end, actually, another instance where we see feet. So there's actually a number of different places, if you think about it. There's a number of different places in the Bible where we talk about feet. It's kind of a strange thing, actually. As I was thinking about it, I was like, gosh, why do we spend so much time talking about feet? And I don't really know the answer to that. But what I do know is that we can dive in and check out some different scripture passages and see what it is that is going on. So the two primary ones that this person asked in their question regards Exodus chapter 3 and Isaiah chapter 6. And in both of these instances, we see that there's some emphasis on feet, either covering feet or actually exposing feet to the ground. So let's dive in. So the first one comes with Moses, actually. So in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, let's just read it here. So we'll begin with chapter 3, verse 1, and we will continue through verse 6. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and lo, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. Then he said, Do not come near. Put off your shoes from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Oh man, this is so good. I mean, just that scene is incredible. You got to imagine this. God appears to you, and he speaks to you. In this burning bush, he sees him. This is what we call a theophany, where God reveals himself to somebody, to anybody, ultimately. And here, of course, he's revealing himself to Moses. And of course, hopefully we know the context that at this time, this is when God's people are enslaved in Egypt and they're being treated so terribly by the Pharaoh. And even he's killing many of their babies, their baby boys, especially throwing them into the river. Moses miraculously survived this by basically the working of God, the power of God at work. He's been raised in Pharaoh's court, and he still has a heart for his Hebrew people. So out of defense for them, he killed one of the Egyptians, and then he runs off to hide. And so now here he is in the desert. He's married, and he's just kind of doing his thing. And now the Lord's calling him. He's like, I've got a plan for you, Moses. I've got a plan. And this is that plan. So anyway, so the question ultimately is this, is okay, we talk about Moses and his mission and all that stuff. But the question is what's the deal with the feet? Take off your sandals for your shoes, I guess it says in this translation. Other translations say sandals. Take off your sandals, for the ground on which you are standing is holy ground. What's the deal here? So that word holy, in Hebrew the word is kadosh. So kadosh means set apart, something that is uncommon. So there's common, and then there's uncommon. So things that are common, of course, are things that we interact with on our normal daily basis. You can think of the ground that Moses walked on. It's like, this is common. It's ground. I walk on it every day. I do the same things every day. My flock that I'm caring for, they're on this ground, and I just walk among them. And now the Lord calls to him, and he says, this ground is kadosh. This ground is set apart. And it makes sense, because this, of course, is where God is appearing. And wherever God is the most uncommon of all uncommon beings, I suppose, right? Because he's the one who creates the common. He's the one who makes a distinction between what is common and what is uncommon. And so what is he doing? He's saying this ground is set apart. And so take off your shoes, because your shoes have been walking around among the common, and the common is not fit to belong or to be a part of, or to walk on top of what is uncommon. I think there is something here about you could think of the dust that's on the bottom of Moses' sandals from walking around the ground, the common ground. And now the Lord's like, no, this dust, it's not common, it's uncommon, and the common should not be superior or should not be over the uncommon. And so take off your sandals. So there's something there. In fact, we know in the book of Exodus later on. So eventually, God saves his people. They cross the Red Sea. They're in freedom. And now the Lord is going to give them a new covenant on Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments and with the book of the law in Exodus chapters 20 through 23. And then he's going to give him instructions about worship. Beginning in chapter 25, the Lord gives him instructions about how to build this tent of meeting, or we call it the tabernacle. It could be called either one of those, the tent of meeting or the tabernacle. And basically what it is like, this is the sanctuary of the Lord. In Exodus chapter 24, Moses and Aaron's two sons, Nadab and Abihu, they go up on Mount Sinai, which is a different mountain than where Moses is, I believe. That's my understanding. Anyway, they go up on Mount Sinai, and there they see God. They see him. And they actually see the ground beneath the Lord's feet, and how this ground is it's different. It's like ground like sapphire. This is not mountainous terrain. Basically they're brought into this vision, or into maybe even a reality of heaven, so that they could see God and they could eat and drink with him. And so then the Lord instructs Moses to build this tabernacle, this tent of meeting, so that it could be a place for his people to go and offer worship. And he tells him actually to follow the pattern that he saw up on the mountain in the tabernacle. So in other words, to construct the tabernacle according to what he saw in heaven. So in Exodus chapter 30, actually, the Lord gives a command in Exodus chapter 30, verses 17 through 21. Where it says this: "The Lord said to Moses, you shall also make a laver of bronze with its base of bronze for washing, and you shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and you shall put water in it, with which Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet. When they go into the tent of meeting, or when they come near the altar to minister, to burn an offering by fire to the Lord, they shall wash with water, lest they die. They shall wash their hands and their feet, lest they die. It shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and to his descendants throughout their generations." So the Lord commands Moses, like, okay, take this big bowl and put water in it, and put the water between the tent of meeting and between the altar. So the altar, of course, is the place where they offer sacrifice. And the tent of meeting is the holy place where God is. Like the Holy of Holies especially is where the Ark of the Covenant is placed. Like this is where God lives, where the Shekinah cloud, it will descend into there. This is the presence of God's glory. And he tells them, okay, they need to make sure they wash. Why? Again, because when they're not in the tent, they're among the common. They're among things that we encounter in everyday life. And the common is not necessarily bad. It's just that they're entering into a space that is uncommon. This, I think, is something that we could even think about when we're entering our churches, is like, okay, well, I in my daily life, I encounter things that are common, or things that, maybe a word that we don't think about much is vulgar. To speak in vulgar language is to speak in common language, like the language of the common people. The Latin Vulgate, this was radical when St. Jerome translated the Hebrew and the Greek scriptures into Latin, because the Latin language was the common language of the people. That's why it's called the Vulgate. It was the vulgar language. Now, we tend to associate vulgar language, vulgarity with like swear words and those kinds of things. But maybe something that we could reflect on is like, okay, the Lord clearly is calling his priests when they go into the tent of meeting and when they go to the altar of sacrifice. He's clearly calling them, not just calling them, but like commanding them to set apart themselves from what is vulgar. So when we go into our churches, this is part of why it's so important for us to be reverent and respectful when we go into the church, because we want to set apart what is common, what is vulgar, and let our words be holy words. In some ways, this is why people might even dress up for Mass when they go, or just dressing up for when they're going into a church, if that's what they're sensing the Lord is inviting them to, is like, I don't want to set aside what is common and let this place be a place that is kadosh, a place that is holy, a set apart place. So anyway, the Lord commands us. He's like, look, they need to wash themselves, because if they don't, he says, what? Lest they die. They will die if they bring what is common into the sacrifice. Why? Because the Lord, wherever the Lord is holy. It is set apart. It is truly kadosh. So the tabernacle floor, the Lord is even saying, if the ground where the burning bush was is holy ground, so too the tabernacle, because this is where the presence of God is among the people. the tabernacle floor is holy, and so they are to wash themselves. In fact, there's instructions in the book of Exodus about how the priests, when they were to go in, they were to wear special clothing, actually. Clothing that the Lord commanded them to wear, so that it was just clear that while they're in the tent of meeting and they're offering the sacrifice, they're wearing their special clothing, that this is a time for us to be entirely focused on offering the sacrifice, on being in the presence of God. So they would wear that. And we know this because our priests today, we still wear special clothing. Priests wear special vestments that they dress themselves in before going into the sanctuary, into the new Holy of Holies, to offer sacrifice to God, the sacrifice of the Mass. But anyway, so ancient Jewish literature, some of it says, so I haven't studied all of it, obviously, I haven't really studied much of it, but what I found is that some ancient Jewish literature actually, it states that priests, while they were in the temple, they were barefoot. They were walking around barefoot because, again, the dirt from their shoes or on the soles of their feet, this was common dirt. And so it's like, I don't want anything common to be standing above what is uncommon. And so to even walk around barefoot as they're offering the sacrifice, like that's an incredible thing just to think about. It kind of makes me think, actually, like, gosh, I wonder if I should be barefoot. I think actually the instructions of the church is that priests would be wearing shoes while they're offering the Mass. But it kind of makes me wonder, like, maybe I should have a special set of shoes that I wear. I've seen priests do this, actually, that they'll have a special set of shoes or a special set of footwear that they'll wear when they're offering the Mass. And that's something for me that maybe I just need to look into a little bit more. But it is a fascinating thing just to think about and to try to bring this into my life of like, okay, I'm going into a holy place. How can I, like, live differently while I'm in the holy place? Even if I don't have fancy clothes, or even if I'm not going to wear fancy clothes every time I go into the church, or even if I'm not like, whatever. Maybe I can still, like, wash my hands. Maybe I can still just really take a moment before I enter in. This could be a really basic thing. Take a moment before I enter into the church to just pause and recognize where it is that I'm going. That, I think, is something that everybody could do. Maybe you don't have to have super fancy clothes. Maybe you don't have to have an extra pair of shoes. Maybe whatever. But you can take a moment and just pause and say, I'm about to enter into the holy place. And yes, I'm not a ministerial priest. I mean, I am, and maybe some who are watching are. But if you're baptized, you are a baptized priest, and so you are entering into a place where priests offer sacrifice. And you participate in the sacrifice by uniting your heart and your will with the sacrifice that the ministerial priest is offering. And that's incredible. And so maybe when we're in our church, we just want to try to make sure we're extra quiet and extra attentive to the movements of the Lord. We want to make sure we're extra attentive to the voice of the Lord as he speaks through his minister, as he speaks through the scriptures, as he comes down upon the altar in the holy sacrifice when we're at Mass. That's incredible. It's just incredible to think about. Okay, the next instance of talking about feet then comes in Isaiah chapter 6. And the reason this question was asked was because there's a different response here in Isaiah chapter 6. So Isaiah 6, we'll just read the first, let's read the first 3 verses here. So in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the Seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet. And with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, and the whole earth is full of his glory. This is also incredible. So we could read actually even more verses, but I just want to stop there because the question is focused on these seraphim. So the word seraphim means burning ones. So these angels they're like on fire. Isaiah doesn't mention like they're on fire, but he calls them seraphim actually. So that means they're on fire. So like these angels were on fire, and somehow they have these 6 wings, and with 2 of them they cover their face, because it's actually a similar thing. We saw this at the end of our passage from Exodus, is that when the Lord reveals himself to Moses, Moses covers his face, because there's a biblical principle in the Old Testament at least that you cannot see the face of God and live. That God is so holy, his radiance is so radiant, that upon seeing him, if you see him face to face, eye to eye, that you're gonna die of the radiance just penetrating into you. That's the idea. So they cover their faces because it's like, well, who can see God and live? It's like that's the idea. But then there's this question of like, okay, well, Moses was instructed to take off his sandals and to walk around barefoot. He wasn't instructed to cover his feet. Now the angels here, with two of their other wings, they cover their feet. And what's the deal with that? So to be clear, I think we can just make a simple distinction that these are two different creatures. Humans are different creatures than angels are. And so perhaps it's the case that to express reverence, angels and humans would both seek to express reverence, but would express reverence differently. Expressing respect and honor and adoration to God, doing that differently. Now, there's clearly some similarities where both are going to try to cover their faces in seeing the fullness of God face to face, but maybe the Lord just has different instructions for the angels. So that I think is one thing. Another thing that that one commentator that I saw said was that they cover their feet out of modesty, so that these angels, these burning ones who come before the Lord, they don't bear their entire body before the Lord, but instead they modestly cover themselves up out of reverence for being in the presence of their Creator. Which again is like, in some ways, we as humans seek to do that as well, or at least we ought to seek to do that, to be modest, at least when we go into churches, but in fact, maybe even to be modest all the time, to try to dress modestly, to try to not show off our bodies, but instead to recognize like God has created us. He's created our bodies, and our bodies are holy in a real way, especially because, now in the Christian context, when we're baptized, we become temples of Christ, temples of the Holy Spirit, where the Holy Trinity lives within us. And so our temples are holy, our bodies are holy. And so there could be this reality of like, okay, well, I want to dress modestly because I bear God within me. And so sometimes you'll see this actually, that people will intentionally choose to go over and above the cultural standards of dressing, and they'll actually dress modestly because they want to let their bodies be a temple, something that points people toward the glory of God rather than toward maybe their bodily features. So that I think is something that maybe that's a separate video for a separate time perhaps. But anyway, that could be the thing. Another thing I saw that I think was super fascinating actually was that this one commentator was suggesting that that the feet of the angels, the soles of their feet looked like the sole of the foot of a calf. So we can agree that angels, they don't naturally have bodies. And so if they take on the appearance of a body, it's because the Lord allows them to. And so, whatever that might look like, I don't know. I've never seen an angel personally myself. But this person suggested that the feet of these angels looked like the soles of a calf, like a young cow or a young bull. And so they covered their feet out of respect for Isaiah, who represents Israel. And they cover their feet so that they don't remind Israel of the golden calf, which is something that we see in Exodus chapter 32, actually, that the people are they grow impatient with Moses up on the mountain because he's up there for 40 days. They grow impatient with him, and so they command Aaron to build for them a calf, something for them to worship. And so Aaron takes all their gold and he throws it into a fire, it melts, and he forms it into this golden calf. And the people start to worship this golden calf and commit some really serious abominations. It's like the Lord is giving his marital vows to Moses up on the mountain, and the people are symbolically and in some cases maybe literally committing the sin of adultery at the bottom of the mountain. And so this is a grave sin. It's like, in some ways, it's like a repeat of the fall of Adam and Eve, where the Lord has brought them into freedom and invited them, called them to worship him and to obey him, and they have instead chosen to worship false gods or to move towards other forms of worship and seeking their own satisfaction, that kind of thing. So anyway, according to this one commentator, which may or may not be true, we don't really know what they looked like, and it's just not super clear why they cover their feet, but I just love this kind of image of okay, the angels are always aware. They're always aware of what leads humanity into sin. And so out of modesty, they cover up their feet, which look like the feet of calves, so that the people don't have to be reminded of the grave abominations that they've committed, or that the people might not be tempted to worship them. So that ultimately, again, they could point everything to the Lord. And then what is it they're singing? Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. I wanted to read that because it's like Isaiah gets this image into the heavenly temple, and he sees that they're singing a song. And what is the song that they're singing? It is the very song that we as Catholic Christians sing right before the consecration at Mass. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. And then from there, what do? We fall down to our knees. And what does Isaiah do when he sees this? Is he's just immediately oh my gosh, I'm not worthy to be here. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. That's incredible. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now I want to add one more, actually, because this is another thing that's just, it's fascinated me. And like I said, there are many instances of talking about feet in the gospel, or in the Bible in general. But there's one in the gospels that I've always found fascinating. So in Matthew 28, it might be in other gospels too, but for sure in Matthew 28, which is the story, the chapter where Matthew talks about the resurrection. It's the very last chapter in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew talks about the resurrection, and it says this. So we'll read this. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone, and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. Lo, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, Hail! And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. Cool, man. That's, again, it's like this incredible thing. So they see an angel, and this angel has a different appearance, perhaps, than what Isaiah saw in the temple. This angel has the appearance, it seems like, of a man, and yet at the same time, what does it say? It says his appearance was like lightning. that I guess, maybe they don't appear like men. They appear like lightning, and his raiment was white as snow. That I would love to see that. I would love to see that, Lord. If you want to give me that vision, I'm happy to receive it. But as it is, like, whew, man, that's incredible just to think about, just to anticipate and imagine it, through like little prayer called Lectio Divina. It's just like I pray with this and I just imagine it, and I try to imagine, but it's like this is an extraordinary thing. So in so many ways, like I can't fully imagine it. Okay, anyway, so the point that I want to get at here is when Jesus appears to them, he says, "Hail!" In other words, he's like, "Hey, here I am," that kind of thing. And then what? They come and they take hold of his feet. I've always wondered, like, why do they take hold of his feet? And to be sure, I don't know the full answer, and I'm certainly open to hearing things. A couple of things that I think about is one, Isaiah chapter 52 verse 7. So let's read that real quick. This also is like just a really great thing. So this is the Lord speaking. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good tidings, who publishes peace, who brings good tidings of good, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, Your God reigns. This is awesome. So Jesus just died. He was placed in a tomb in the sepulcher, and he was there. And he was there overnight. He was there overnight twice. So it seems like he's dead. And now they go to anoint him, and they see him like, wait a minute, what? Like Jesus has just risen from the dead? He reigns. He reigns over what? He reigns over everything. He is the king of the universe. He reigns over death itself. And so, what? This is the message he comes to bring good tidings, or to bring good news. What is the good news? The good news is that Jesus is who he says he is. He is the King of all. He is the Lord of lords. He is the Prince of Peace. Like, he's everything. And he reigns. And that's good news. That is good news. And so they take hold of his feet because his feet proclaim good news. I've been on this for actually a few years now. It's just like how incredible it is that Jesus has feet, that he has a body. He who is the second person of the Holy Trinity comes down from heaven and takes on our broken human nature. And he's born as a baby, where he has feet. And a whole body, yes, but how beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good tidings. He has come to bring good tidings. And he does this during his earthly ministry, but he does it above all in his resurrection, when he rises from the dead, and his feet alone, as they walk upon the earth, his feet, which are holy, it's like he's taking his feet and he's putting them in their proper place, which is taking what is holy and putting it on top of what is common. The priests in the temple, the priests in the tabernacle, they had to wash their feet because their feet were common and covered with common dirt, and they washed their feet so that they would not stain what is uncommon, what is holy and set apart for the Lord. Jesus' feet, by virtue of them being the feet of the Savior, the feet of God, that in itself is like, wow. The feet of God, they are holy. They are uncommon, and so they don't need to be washed because he himself, everywhere that he goes, he makes the ground holy simply by standing on top of it. How beautiful are those feet? And so they grab hold of those feet because I want to be wherever those feet are. And I want to worship the one whose feet, or who belongs to those feet. That's what they're up to, I think. I mean, and there's probably more explanations, but I just think like the feet of Jesus, there's no disorder in them. Our feet, if we go into a holy place, there's a natural disorder because of sin, because our feet belong to someone who is a sinful person, and so they naturally need to be washed ritually before they can enter into this holy place. They need to be brought back into proper order. Jesus is already in perfect order, and so there is no disorder in him, and so wherever he goes, he brings order, he brings holiness, he brings good news. Oh man, that's so beautiful, so incredible. So brothers and sisters, I pray, and hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully it's like insightful. I don't know. I think more than anything, it can just like it can remind us maybe of a couple things. One is that God has called us uniquely, and that call to us is different than his call to the angels. But at the same time, the angels exist to serve us, just like these angels pointed to the glory of God, just like the angel in the resurrection pointed to the reality of the resurrection. So to the angels who don't naturally have bodies, they exist to serve us, to point us to the glory of God. So that's something that our call is different. It's unique compared to their call, and yet their call exists to serve our call. And the third thing I think is just that wherever the Lord is holy ground. And so whenever we go into a place that is on holy ground, we want to worship, we want to be prepared, and we want to bring order. We want to let the Lord bring order to our disorder. Let him bring healing and cleansing to our sinfulness, our filth, whatever it is. Beautiful. Great. If you have any questions, if you have anything you just want me to talk about, anything that's worth diving into, like I had to dive into this. I didn't really know the answer, and so I was happy to study, and as I was studying, I was like, this is awesome. This is so incredible. So if you have anything you want me to talk about, to explain, to teach, I love trying to teach, and I love trying to answer questions. By all means, leave some comments, find out another way to reach out to me, whatever it is. Okay, God bless you.